when I think about how an everyday person is thinking about AI, it's like they're not thinking about AI. They're ignoring all of this stuff altogether. The models aren't yet useful enough that the general public will go out and use them, especially with things like Apple Intelligence launching, trying to, make these things approachable for everyday people. It's clear that, the scaling hypothesis is still in full force here. We still need more power to push the models to get better inputs and outputs and responses. Welcome back to another episode of For Perspective. Today, we're going to talk about getting started with AI, and we'll go through a few different levels from starting to use the models for the first time all the way to reading the latest news and research. All right, let's start out with the first and easiest. We'll call this level 1. And that's just going into these different platforms and starting to use them. Claude, ChatGPT, and Perplexity are the three that I use the most. And let's start with ChatGPT. It's kind of like the jack of all trades. It does a little bit of everything. It has image generation, video generation, a bunch of different models with advanced reasoning, deep research, and now even search abilities that the model can go out and search the web just like Google would. Claude I find to be a great creative partner. I use Claude a lot for brainstorming ideas. I'll put video scripts into the model and ask it for bullet point list outputs, summaries, things like that. As I go through the different filming processes, even having it brainstorm titles is good if I have a title that I like and know that I need a few more options just to see if there's anything better out there. It's great at coming up with ideas like that. And then Perplexity is kind of over here in its own category. People treat it like, an AI model itself, but it's using these other AI models to generate its outputs. But Perplexity is more like a Google replacement. It just goes out and searches the web and finds you sources for the topics that you are asking about. You get a certain number of searches with deep research. That's great if you're trying to brainstorm a topic idea. If I'm starting out something research heavy like an AI video, I may put it into Perplexity and be like, hey, what are all the things that I need to know about AI? And find me some published sources that I can reference in this video. And it'll go out and do that. So ChatGPT, great to just get in and play around with. Claude, if you have something a little bit more specific, I like its writing abilities, and it's definitely still seems to be the best for coding, which I don't do much of. And then Perplexity is like, kind of high level. You want to find out information about a topic. Google just isn't doing it for you, and you don't want to scour, tens of hundreds of websites to find the information. Perplexity can go out into the web and find all that information for you. So the best way to get started in AI is just go use these things. Think about if you were going to go Google something, go put it into one of these models. Download the Perplexity app on your computer or your phone or ChatGPT, and go in there and ask the model instead of Google. That'll start getting you a feel for how these things work and how you ask it questions and the input and then what output the model is giving you. So despite people talking about prompt engineering, you don't have to be an engineer to figure this stuff out or understand it. Using it and getting to know the inputs and outputs is the best way, in my opinion. The more you use it, the more you learn about tweaking, getting inputs and outputs and responses that you're looking for. And then, of course, you can implement things that you read from, I'll say, competent sources, because there's a lot of garbage out on the internet. So you kind of have to filter the garbage in, garbage out sort of stuff, and make sure you're reading from somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. Experimenting with search is great. Like I said, with Perplexity, they have search options. Default search is still a great option. The deep research, you get a limited number of searches. on the free plan. And so think about if you have a topic that you are trying to learn, and ask Perplexity. Give it some context about why you want to learn it, and send it on its way. See what kind of sources it comes back with. Read the summary, click into the sources, figure out if that's helpful for what you were trying to learn. ChatGPT Plus now has deep research available. So that is a paid plan. That's the $20 a month plan. As far as I can see, and I asked ChatGPT itself, there isn't a limit to how many deep research searches you can do in the Plus tier right now. So go ahead and try that out as well. I think you can still get a free trial. I might be mistaken if you can get a ChatGPT Plus trial or not. But in my experience, the deep research on ChatGPT takes a little bit longer than Perplexity, but it is kind of set it and forget it. So you can put in your prompt. It may ask you follow-up questions. I do find with ChatGPT, when I put something in there, it's kind of like, oh, do you want this or this or this? And it's kind of like, yes, I want it all. Go get me everything. And image generation is another interesting one. So Claude has the ability to do diagrams and, they call them visualizations, draw you graphs and things like that based on the data that you're inputting. ChatGPT and something like Grok has full up image generation capabilities. So you can just ask it for something like, hey, if Apple designed a shoe, what would it look like? And see what the response would be. So that's kind of level one in a very quick nutshell, but it's basically, get in there and start using the models, see what you can play around with. And you can, if you're stuck and you're like, I don't really know how this could be useful to me, ask the model how it can be useful to you. Go in there and say, hey, what can I do? How can you save me time, make me more efficient? Something like that. Put that prompt in, see what it gives you, and just start the chat process of figuring out how you can create a process that works for you. Level 2, I'm gonna call level 2 podcasts. It's kind of like a little bit more in depth. I watched the Lex Friedman podcast with Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, and he had a couple of his team members on there as well. He seems to be a captivating person. They all came across as highly competent, a little bit nerdy, which is probably good for the AI field. But unlike most engineers that I've met, they seem to have the ability to explain these complex topics in a way that anybody could understand, which shows that they actually understand the content themselves at such a deep level that they can then boil it down so anybody can understand it. And I think that's kind of rare these days. But despite this podcast being a few hours long, I think it's a little over 3 hours, it's definitely worth the watch. So Dario talks through some of the papers that he's written in the past with Lex. They bring on one of their team members who interfaces with Claude the most in terms of creating prompts and how prompts impact responses. And it's just a really great conversation to listen to 3 different perspectives about AI. And Dario talks a lot about AI safety in the beginning. That's something that Anthropic is the clear market leader in right now. There's definitely no sense in building a super powerful AI if we are just rapidly creating the robot apocalypse to unleash it upon ourselves. So some of the things that Anthropic is doing with their risk reduction, the different model tests that they do, each time they come up with a new model to make sure that it's not putting adverse information out into the world. It's not helping people build things that they shouldn't be able to build or give them information to do things that are illegal. it's clear when Dario talks about this stuff that that's like one of his main passions, and definitely comes across when you look at the documentation that Anthropic puts out, that that's core to their mission statement. So leading into what I'll call level 3 is then going the next level deeper, and that's reading. Yeah, you know, you're watching a YouTube podcast right now, but reading some of the stuff that these people have wrote and other industry leaders have written about AI is still a great way to get information. And now you can use the AI to boil down and summarize some of these documents. So some of them are admittedly long, and you may not need to read everything to get the gist of what's going on, but I've picked out a couple, I think, key papers, at least things that I've read as I've researched AI that I think are important and that anybody who's interested in going to this next level should be reading. So the first is Gwern's scaling hypothesis. If I had to boil this down into one sentence, it's kind of like more power equals better models. And I'll leave links to all of these papers in the description down below so you can go check them out yourself. And Dario's essay, Machines of Loving Grace, kind of explores the risks along with the positive impacts of AI. He focuses on biology, chemistry, and other fields, including neuroscience. A really interesting read that is largely painting a positive picture of the future and how AI can help these fields and help humans in the future become, better. Anthropic's responsible scaling policy is a long, kind of, lengthy, in-depth document that details their full framework for testing AI with respect to, safety and autonomy risk. Everybody likes to use AGI now. Dario seems to like powerful AI instead, but this document's effectively like a risk reduction document. It's like, if X happens, then Y. If Y, then Z. So kind of testing the models and burning down the risk as they go before they release something. And this is a policy and framework that they've shared industry-wide. So hopefully other people are starting to pick this up and do these things as well. And then lastly is Rich Sutton's The Bitter Lesson, also discussed in the context of scaling laws in AI, and the principles of prioritizing compute over algorithmic breakthroughs, and how humans may want to program their own kind of thoughts and methods into these things in the short term to get better results, but how that does not lead to breakthroughs in the future, in the long term. So then that takes us to the current state of AI. So things are rapidly improving. Just a few weeks ago, we got Claude 3.7, Sonnet, Grok 3, OpenAI released Deep Research for Plus, and then released ChatGPT 4.5. So things are moving quickly because there's so many people working on AI, but generally the amount of time between major releases is still pretty lengthy, right? There's a lot of pre-training that goes on, feeding data into models and creating models. So the time, I don't remember exactly what it was, but the time between GPT-4 and GPT 4.5 being released seems like it was quite a long time. Maybe it wasn't, but Claude and Anthropic has been iterating on this Sonnet model. They had 3.5. They had a newer post-trained version of 3.5. Now they're on 3.7. I think everybody's waiting for 4, expecting that to come at some point. But right now, the scaling hypothesis seems to be holding true. So every time these new models come out, they require more power. We need more data centers. We need more GPUs. to crank these models inputs and outputs. And that kind of takes us to DeepSeek. So there was a big media, explosion about DeepSeek when R1 came out. Now they claim to have spent a lot less money training the model and use a lot less power. They're working on older NVIDIA GPUs, but from my perspective, I didn't go use R1. Again, now there's a whole discussion of privacy in China, whether you believe the investment story or not, whatever. We'll push all that to the side. But generally, what I was seeing online was that it's actually pretty good in its responses, but like kind of on par with how ChatGPT was doing stuff. So, okay, great. We've made a more efficient version of ChatGPT, but from the everyday user's perspective, like us nerds who are out there using AI right now, think all of this stuff is great. We're watching the advancements in real time. When I think about how an everyday person is thinking about AI, it's like they're not thinking about AI. They're ignoring all of this stuff altogether. The models aren't yet useful enough that the general public will go out and use them, especially with things like Apple Intelligence launching, trying to, make these things approachable for everyday people. It's clear that, the scaling hypothesis is still in full force here. We still need more power to push the models to get better inputs and outputs and responses. And that seems to be still leading to better models. Will the scaling hypothesis ever hit a wall? I have no idea. I do think today that the usefulness of the models that are being released, despite how useful it is to the people who are actively using them, it's nowhere close to where the general public will want them to be before they start thinking about using them. And probably not yet where they are in terms of, and from the engineering side, we also probably want them to be more powerful and do better things before we start thinking about efficiencies. So if I think about this in terms of computers, since I understand, kind of been in the computer space a lot longer than I have been working and using with AI, PCs over the last few years seem to have kind of stagnated. And I have this PC here with an NVIDIA 1080 Ti graphics card in it. And sure, the 2000, 3000, 4000, now we're on the 5000 series GPUs. We have like real-time ray tracing, some pretty significant graphical advancements. But honestly, like the experience of a 1080 Ti and gaming on that isn't all that different than a 5000 series GPU. So in 5 generations, to get all that extra, all the extra features, we've dumped more power at the problem, right? So computers today need much bigger power supplies. The graphics cards are more power hungry than they have ever been in order to have all that compute and do it all on a chip inside of the case. CPUs seem to have kind of been going the other way for a long time. They're trying to shrink the die size. You hear about the different nanometer processes, 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer, that's that sort of stuff. Those come up, especially with now that Apple is kind of leading the way with their system on a chip stuff. But CPUs in general, we're trying to work harder and consume less power. So smaller chip, pack more on the chip, get more out of it, but do it more efficiently. It wasn't until the M series chips came out with Apple Silicon and their system on a chip architecture with the M1 that we really saw a significant improvement in terms of lower the power consumption, but still have really great performance. And how long did that take, right? I don't even know. Intel, Apple for decades was using off-the-shelf Intel processors and graphics from companies like AMD and NVIDIA. They were beholden to those chips. They really didn't have any say. It wasn't customized to the hardware that they were doing. And with the M1 chip, Apple kind of stopped throwing power at the problem. And that was one of the biggest things I noticed when I got my M1 computer was how efficient it was. You could go a day, maybe 2 days with the M1 MacBook Air on battery, which is like unheard of for a Windows laptop. So it took decades of innovation in the CPU industry before we started worrying about how do we make this more efficient. And of course, that comes with a trade-off. So the M series computers are highly capable in creative tasks like photo and video editing. But if you were going to go try to game on these computers, yeah, they can do it, but they're not outputting, as much raw gaming performance as still a computer with a dedicated GPU in it. So I think this large analogy was to say, it took years and years and years to get to the performance to a level where it was actually worth thinking about, okay, how do we go change this architecture, keep the power that our consumers care about, and fix the efficiency or inefficiency, rather, of the chips that they were using. I think we're in that same spot with AI right now, as keeping to add the power, get models better and better and better until they're at a point where it makes sense to figure out how to make it more efficient. So I already kind of mentioned that, the AI, for those of us that are using them and have seen what it's capable of today, we think it's amazing. There's a ton of engineers, a ton of people I work with who are just like totally blind to AI. They have no idea how it could possibly improve their life, how to even use it, or why you would even use AI. So I think we're still very early in this race, and there's, a long way to go in the AI space before it's mainstream, like the word Google is for a search engine. And I've also mentioned Claude is still my favorite. Its naming convention is probably the least confusing out of all of the companies at the moment, but still a little bit confusing. They have 3 different model sizes, kind of a small model, a medium model, a large model. Now with Sonnet 3.7, they have advanced reasoning. I think they call it thinking. We got to do better in the AI space of naming products. I think ChatGPT or OpenAI is the worst offender in terms of naming conventions. You go in there and you actually have the choice of like 5 different models, and then you could choose legacy models if you want to. Even to somebody who uses it all the time, it's not clear what each of the models do. They give you like a little blurb that's 3 words long that tries to explain what to use the models for, but again, like experimentation is the only way to figure out if the question that you're asking is better suited with a different model. You may not know that unless you use the different model. So their CEO, Sam Altman, on Twitter has said they're going to start working on the naming problem. I don't know why we have this problem to begin with, but anyways, that aside, that's another thing that the average person would be frustrated with when they go in there and it may not be giving them the answer that they want, and they should be using O3 Mini instead of 4.0. Again, don't ask me why. These names don't make any sense to me either, but at least the leaders have recognized the issue and supposedly will start working on it. I haven't mentioned Grok a lot in this, but it is pretty impressive. Grok 3 is out now, and just in a couple of years, they've really closed the gap on the other big competitors to OpenAI. And Perplexity, we'll go back to where we started. The free plan in Perplexity is great to experiment. Think about it more like a search and less like a large language model itself. Of course, each one of these does things a little bit better than the other one. You'll have to go, it'll be pretty easy actually to figure out which one you like best, especially if you're just comparing ChatGPT and Claude. because they're kind of in the same category and Perplexity's off in its own category. And then lastly, a couple resources and things that I subscribe to. So from the newsletter front, MIT has a technology review newsletter is what it's called. The TLDR newsletters are great for AI and tech in general. They do a lot of product and design. They kind of have newsletters for different categories, and you can pick and choose which ones you want to subscribe to. And then there's a host of other tech related and AI related newsletters that you could subscribe to if you're interested in seeing these things in your inbox on a weekly basis as well. And on that note, I've launched a weekly newsletter called The Digital Pulse. I include some AI things in there every once in a while. At least I try to do the best story, in my opinion, for the week. I write about everything else that's going on this YouTube channel and the podcast as well. It's the only place to check out what's coming up next for me. I do a What's Up Next where I detail what videos are in the works right now. And you can subscribe for free at billmclean.substack.com. I look forward to having you. So we covered a lot about AI today, from getting into the models and using it maybe for the first time at level 1, to diving deeper to listen to AI leaders and watch them talk and have conversations on things like podcasts. And then level 3, getting even deeper into the weeds with AI news and the latest research papers that are coming out. I hope you took some value from this conversation today. As I continue to learn about AI and use it on a day-to-day basis, I'll share more on my thoughts in the future. Until next time, thanks for watching. Later.